we've put together a presentation here, and there's a lot of information, and there will be funders that we haven't kind of covered, but it's just to give you kind of an overview of the different funders that might be available for the work that you're thinking of doing. So in this presentation, we're going to particularly look at the NIHR, the MRC, the Wellcome Trust, and a number of different charities that are available for funding. So NIHR, there are a number of schemes that we're going to talk about today. So that there is the Research for Patient Benefit, EME, so Efficacy and Mechanism Evaluation, the Health Technology Assessment, and Fellowships. There are other streams that may be relevant. The NIHR have researcher-led work streams, but they also have commission calls. And sometimes, there is one at the moment, which you'll see later on in the presentation, that there is something specifically to cancer at the moment. So it's useful to keep a check on their websites to see what's coming up and what might be suitable for the work that you're doing. So Research for Patient Benefit. This is a scheme. There are 3 tiers within the within RFPB. They should have a clear trajectory towards benefiting patients, benefiting the health or well-being of patients and users of the NHS and social care. It is funded in 3 different tiers. There is a tier of tier 3 is up to 150,000 for exploratory type studies. So the expectation for this type of study is that the distance from kind of finishing the study to patient benefit is likely to be longer and further away than if you're going for the tier 1, which is for 350,000, that the trajectory to patient benefit would be expected to be shorter for those. It's a maximum of 36 months of duration for these grants, and there are 3 competitions a year. The deadlines for these are usually in March, July, and November. So EME will fund research to determine the proof of clinical efficacy, the size of effect, and the long-term safety in a well-defined population. They will fund a wide variety of different interventions that have the potential to maintain health, treat disease, and improve recovery. They will fund hypothesis testing and research based on an efficacy study to explore the mechanisms of action or interventions, the causes of differences in responses, or the disease mechanisms. A health technology assessment. This tends to be a funding stream that you may go to EME initially with kind of a proof of concept type of work, and then move on to HTA, which tend to fund larger randomized controlled trials. But that's not all that they fund. So they will look to fund systematic reviews, economic models, meta-analyses, mixed treatment comparisons. There is a wide variety of studies that they would be willing to look at and consider for funding. They will also look, like Michael spoke about earlier, they will consider trials that are not the usual of a randomized control trials. They will consider non-randomized trials. They'll consider single center studies if there's a strong case to be made that makes sense. So they'll look at, as long as there is a reasoning behind what it is that you're proposing to do, there is a strong evidence base, that they will look at what it is that you're proposing and a potential to fund that particular work. They want the results to be generalizable to the wider NHS. They'll look at cohorts, they'll consider cohort studies that are retrospective or prospective. They'll consider adaptive designs and modelling studies. So there is a wide array of study designs that they will consider for funding. Fellowships take up, there are a number of different fellowships within NIHR. There is the more academic side of them. So they have a doctoral fellowship and advanced fellowship. So the doctoral fellowship would be for a 3-year award that would support an individual to undertake a PhD in an area of NHS research, NIHR research. Following on from that, there's the opportunity to think about maybe an advanced fellowship. Now, in the advanced fellowship, there is possibilities of being able to carry out a clinical trial. Within the doctoral fellowship, it's not unheard of, but it's not as common that a clinical trial would be funded. So as part of the NIHR fellowships, you will be assessed looking at kind of 3 individual areas. They look at the person, so yourself, so kind of where you are with your research career, what research experience you've had. They'll look at the project itself, so what it is that you're proposing to do. It needs to fall within the remit of NIHR and be in scope for what they fund. They also look at the place that you are positioned in, so whether or who your project team are around you, so your supervisors, your mentors. As part of the NIHR fellowships, they also fund a training package. So that training package is expected to not only help you to complete the actual project that it is that you're doing, but also to think about developing you as a researcher moving forwards. So very much thinking about the research skills that you need to become that research leader. There is funding for, within the advanced fellowship, there is funding for you to have a research assistant as part of the actual fellowship. And that person can be up to a whole-time equivalent for 3 years. There is also availability for funding for that research assistant to do training and attend conferences. And so as part of the advanced fellowship, the expectation would be that you'd be taking on potentially some, if you haven't already got the experience, some form of leadership type courses to enable you to become that research leader and be able to supervise that research assistant. So for the advanced fellowship, it used to be a system that were actually separated into like a new postdoc and an advanced postdoc. There was a transitional fellowship and a knowledge mobilization fellowship. They've now combined it all into one, so it's a little bit more flexible. So it can be that you've just completed your PhD or about to be awarded a PhD, but you haven't quite established yourself as an independent researcher. You might have established yourself as an independent researcher, but not recognised as an international leader of your field. And like I said previously, they had what was classified as a transition fellowship, and this falls into here. So they're willing to look at people who are transitioning from a basic science background or re-establishing your research career following a break. So these are the fellowships that are kind of on the academic side. They also have clinical fellowships. So they have the clinical doctoral fellowship, which will fund registered healthcare professionals to undertake a PhD by research, but also allow that person to continue with professional development and clinical practice. There is the clinical lectureship, which is a postdoctoral fellowship, specifically looking at for clinical academics. So supporting people who are in the early stages of the postdoctoral career and who wish to establish themselves as an independent clinical academic, and the senior clinical lectureship. Now, all of these clinical fellowships offer the same opportunities as the fellowships in that they will fund for training alongside a project. Moving on to the MRC. So I've kind of looked through the MRC. I've highlighted specifically the developmental pathway funding scheme. So these will fund academically led transitional projects that aim to improve prevention, diagnosis, prognosis, or treatment of significant health needs, or to develop research tools that increase the efficiency of developing interventions. They're willing to look at prototype discovery and design, preclinical testing of novel interventions, early phase clinical studies of novel interventions in phases 1 and 2A. The MRC also have a number of fellowships. So they have a career development award, which supports researchers to do in their postdoctoral research who are not clinically active to think about their research skills and to transition from postdoctoral researcher to independent investigator. They have the non-clinical fellowship, the senior role, which helps independent researchers to develop a track record and become leaders in their field. So they are very, very similar to NIHR in the fact that they have kind of a very clear career progression within the fellowships. So that, like NIHR, they also have a number of clinical fellowships, and again, very similar at the levels. So you have the training fellowship, you've got the clinical science fellowship, which helps to develop medical and other clinically qualified professionals who've gained a higher research degree. Then there's the senior clinical fellowship. So again, very similar route through to gaining the fellowship and being able to complete a research project. The Wellcome Trust is another area that we said we discussed today. So they have collaborative awards in science. So that particular award would fund teams of researchers that consist of independent research groups that kind of bring together and work on the most important scientific problems that can only be solved through a collaborative effort. They have an investigator award in science, again, enabling independent researchers to tackle the most important questions in science. They have innovator awards. So this is looking at opportunities to develop ideas of innovations that could potentially have a significant impact on human health. The Wellcome Trust also have a number of fellowships. They have the senior research fellowships, the clinical research career development, and then there are a number of PhD opportunities as well. And some of these opportunities that I've kind of talked about briefly here are also, we've got a list at the end of the presentation of upcoming opportunities that are currently open with deadlines coming up in the next few months. So,
Natasha, could you please stop sharing? Sorry.
Yeah. I'm going to swap over.
Yeah, so I'll just share my screen.
Svetlana is going to carry on with the presentation now and talk about the specific charities that are available for cancer projects.
Thank you, Natasha. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so there are quite a few charities available to apply for funding. And we have looked at the charities that are members of Association of Medical Research Charities, this MRC here. And there are basically two types of charities. So there are charities that support all types of cancer. You can see the four main charities here on the screen. And in general, they support a wide variety of research in the field of cancer. There might be minor differences in the things that they support, such as some are more oriented on finding the treatments, and some are more focused on preventing cancer through lifestyle changes. But in general, they are very inclusive for all types of projects. Yeah, so now there are also charities that focus on specific types of cancer. Again, there are very many of them, so we have summarized kind of the main types of charities. As you can see, you have charities that support research in blood cancer, bone cancer, brain tumor, leukemia. Again, they have a kind of their scope, what they are funding, but mostly they support all types of research in specific cancers. So we have the websites of their charities and basically the main areas that they fund. Now it's important to say that now, because of COVID, some funding schemes are suspected. So it's important to check what's going on in a specific charity. Slide. Okay, so this is basically a second half of the list of charities. Mostly they are called according to the cancer they fund. There are some exceptions like Solving Kids Cancer that is focused. It's focusing on neuroblastoma, which is not clear from its name. So regarding the suspension, I know that Oracle Cancer Trust, their fundings are currently suspended. But in general, there are a lot of charities, and basically you have to look at them and to find a specific one you think you might be interested in applying for funding. So as Natasha mentioned, we have summarized the upcoming deadlines that are due in a few months that might be relevant. And so the schemes support different research projects. And so we have summarized the deadlines basically from end of March and onwards. So there are a few NIHR deadlines, MRC deadline, and CRUK, and also neuroblastoma. And